life can hit like a sledgehammer. But guess what? We hit back harder. Welcome to Affirm That Sh. Somehow I thrive. I'm Jennifer Rogers, your no BS guide to turning life's toughest moments into badass victories. Ready to flip the script? Let's affirm that life can be a bitch, but somehow we thrive. Welcome to this week's episode of Affirm That Sh. How many of you have felt so well put together, so polished, so organized, so every checkbox marked, every line crossed, every T crossed, every I dotted? Everything is just right, only to find out later that it's not. You try your best, but no matter what happens, you've got this sensation inside you that is just holding you back. What would you do? What would you do when you're fighting against a battle that no one else but sees or feels but yourself? Today, you're going to meet Clare. And Clare is a true boundary establisher, a survivor, and a woman on a mission to make others understand. Today, you're going to hear her story, and one that she continues to survive and thrive through, no matter how long it's been since the onset. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for being here. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join in our affirmations. We have 3 for you today, and I invite you to say them along with us. Here we go. I am positive. I am purposeful. I am persevering. I am positive. I am purposeful. I am persevering. I am positive. I am purposeful. I am persevering. I am a lover of life. I am a lover of life. I am a lover of life. I am completely nourished by the support of my friends. I am completely nourished by the support of my friends. I am completely nourished by the support of my friends. And after this quick break, you're going to find out just exactly how those friends filled that nourishment for Clare.
Imagine a space where you let go, where the clamor of the world quiets and you meet your truest self. At Yu-Gi-Oh!, through sound vibrations, Reiki, and the wisdom of tarot, we help you release what no longer serves you, align with your energy, and renew your spirit. Begin your journey back to yourself today.
Hi, Clare.
Hi, Jennifer.
Thank you for joining me today, and thank you for being so brave and vulnerable to share your story with our viewers and our listeners.
My pleasure.
So, Clare, how our podcast works is I'm just going to open the floor to you for you to walk us through your journey and share with us where you started, where you are today, and how you're helping others. And don't be afraid to let it go, as this podcast is Affirm That Sh, which is Somehow I Thrived. So we want to know where Clare's been in her shit and how she is thriving today.
Well, it's a long story, so let me start at the beginning. Um, I had a wonderful childhood. I had two parents who were utterly devoted to one another and to their three daughters. I was probably the good girl of the family. I was smart, I was popular, and success came pretty easily to me. Everything changed for me the year after I left school when I developed anorexia. If you look at the type of person that is susceptible to an eating disorder, I was probably ripe for the picking. I was a high achiever. I was a bit of a perfectionist and a control freak. Some people would say not a whole lot has changed. I think the thing that surprises people the most about my eating disorder is how little it had to do with food or weight. I became deeply depressed, and it became very hard for me to take in anything good. I didn't feel worthy of nourishment, and not eating became a way to punish myself. Not a whole lot was known about how to treat eating disorders back in the late 1970s. And I should preface my comments about my treatment by saying that they saved my life. I was at a weight where my kidneys or my heart were probably going to give out in weeks, if not days. So it's really important to acknowledge that it gave me a second chance at life. Having said that, the effects of my treatment were so profound, they lasted a long time after the physical signs of my illness had gone. So, what was that treatment? It was called positive reinforcement, which I found a bit ironic. I, I was placed in a psychiatric facility that no 19-year-old should ever see. I was put on bed rest and everything was taken away from me. So, my toiletries, my jewelry, no books, no TV, no radio, no phone calls, no letters, and hardest of all, no visitors. I
So
lay in a bed,
everything.
yeah, I lay in a bed and I was force fed 7 times a day. Refeeding is just a mathematical equation. If you eat enough revolting hospital food, you will put on weight. And after several months, I reached my goal weight. I was told I was cured and that I should go home and get on with my life. The problem was, I didn't really have a life to go back to. My family wanted to move on from my hospitalization. All my friends were at uni enjoying the life that I thought was going to be mine. And I'd lost my boyfriend, who was the emotional and social center of my world. While I'd been unwell, I had started two different university courses, but my health had deteriorated and I had to give them up. My professor now said 2 strikes and I was out. My parents would always see him as the man that saved my life, so they agreed. And even though I desperately wanted to go back to university, I had become so compliant, I just did what I was told. The problem was I didn't really have any skills to offer an employer at that stage. So my first job was very basic. Despite a fairly simple background, I was able to find my pathway out through work. I was so lucky that every job that I had, somebody saw my potential and gave me opportunities. And I guess I'm a fast learner. Within a couple of years, I had a really challenging, well-paid job, and that part of my life was going well. As far as everything else went, nothing much had changed. One of the hardest things about my hospitalization was that I was constantly watched. So I had a nurse sitting next to me through every meal, and I was monitored at all times. Understandably, my parents took up this role when I went home. I say that because everyone was so terrified I would slip back. But it was all a bit suffocating. So I made the decision to move out and live on my own. This was met with universal horror because everyone thought it was me trying to isolate myself so I could lose weight. But I felt that it was the only way that I could prove to people that I could be trusted. While this was valid, it gave rise to a social isolation that really shaped my life for years to come. I believe that social connection is the most important thing in life, and I had none. I would go to work every day, I would come home and hide in my house. All I'd learned to do in hospital was to eat in a really structured, inflexible way. And so that's what I did to keep myself safe. I didn't think if I lost weight, I could bear to go back into hospital. And I pretty much assumed this would be my life. But I met someone who had a different view. He is probably the most popular person I know. And the last thing he needed was another friend. But he decided that's what I was going to be. I was pretty resistant to start with because he threatened my world in so many ways. But he didn't give up. And suddenly I had to go out and eat. To start with, this was a disaster. Every time something went wrong, I'd fall in a heap, he'd pick me up, and on we'd go. And over time, it became easier. He also had all these friends I had to mix with. And to my surprise, no one really cared too much that I was skinny and a bit weird about food. At the same time that my world was opening up, I reached a bit of a crisis in my career. I was going further and further down a corporate path, and while I was really good at it, it just didn't feel like me. So I threw in my job, went back and studied part-time, and got a part-time job that gave me the opportunity to write. This led to me launching a magazine, and that was the next big step for me. People say that I have printer's ink in my veins, and that's how it felt. From the beginning, I felt like I was home. But being a publisher is a very public role, and it meant going to functions every night, traveling a lot, and this was completely at odds with how I interacted with food. I was going to have to learn to be flexible, and this is something I had tried to do for so long and failed. But now I had something that I loved more than the safety of my eating disorder. I also made the decision to write a book about my illness and my hospitalization. People who know me today have commented that the book ended at a certain point in time, but my recovery continued. So more recently, I decided to put out a second edition of the book and update people on how I was traveling. Writing the epilogue to the book was so empowering for me, Jennifer. It made me realize how far I had come. I have a life today that would have been inconceivable to that sad, frightened young girl in the grip of anorexia. Today, I'm free from all of the obsessive thoughts and behaviors that went with my illness. I'm free of the self-judgment, and I'm free of the shame. Writing the epilogue also gave me the opportunity to look more closely at what constitutes recovery. I don't think it's a number on the scales or a BMI.
No.
I believe that it is about identity. However, destructive and dangerous an eating disorder is, it allows someone to be in the world, a world that's unbearable for them. Like many people with a chronic illness, that became my identity. For such a long time, I was Clare the anorexic, and I had to find a way to rediscover Clare the person. For me, that was creativity. I'm sure for everybody, it's something different. It was quite hard for me to go back and look at those dark days again, now that my life is so transformed. But I really felt that it was important. It was important for people to know that there's hope, that no matter how deeply you are into your suffering, that there is a pathway out, that recovery is possible, and I'm living proof of that.
And I think it's important how you led us straight into your story is that, this is something that started after high school. You were meeting all these goals, you did these things, but it was not about food. It never revolved around food.
No.
It started with that deep depression. And to be able to recognize that in yourself and to pinpoint where this started, I think is magnificent because so many people judge those that are anorexic or bulimic. We've heard all the catty remarks. Oh, why don't you just eat
Yeah.
whatever? And when you and I spoke, we said we wished it was that simple. We wish it was as simple as a meal that satisfied and went on. But you wore those pieces of shame in your words that I didn't feel worthy. And if you don't mind, Claire, this was not a I had my stint in the hospital. I decided that I wanted to move out and be on my own. This is a path that you have walked for years. And so you talk about the epilogue. What is the time frame when you sat down and wrote that book to now it's time to do the epilogue and look at the growth I've had?
I wrote the original book in 1995, so 30 years.
And
I
what is the biggest thing that you found in your growth in that 30 years when you went back and looked through?
I said before that I felt human connection was the most important thing in
Mhm.
life. That's what I discovered. I was so afraid that other people would reject my past that I never put myself out there. It was learning to trust that other people could accept my story and could see the real me. Now I'm surrounded by people who I think value me, not for the numbers on the scale, but what I have to offer the world.
Absolutely. And the power of knowing that those numbers, while they're important, you no longer identify with your illness. You identify as I am Claire, and
Yeah,
this is who I am. And I think that speaks to your heart. I felt an immediate connection when we met that you're so pure in the work that you're doing. And to be honest with us and with yourself, that, when I started, it wasn't easy. How do I behave around food in these social environments? And to see where you are today is just leaps and bounds from the person you were at 19 years old. And so I just think it's important that those who may be walking this same path don't feel like recovery is quick, fast, and easy. Recovery is all day, every day, even 30 years down the road.
it is. I don't want everyone to feel that their journey might be quite as long or hard as mine. I think a lot of the things that I had to overcome were actually reinforced by my treatment. And it's also important to say that while a lot of medical people still equate weight with recovery, the sort of harsh treatment I went through really isn't practiced that way anymore. So I think that my journey was longer because of I was incredibly vulnerable when all my support was taken away. So a lot of the shame and judgment that was put on me in hospital, I absorbed, and that made my journey a lot longer. But it is really important for people, because when I was sick, I just didn't think that people got better. Understandably, because it's such a dramatic disease, that's what the media it sort of focuses on. And
Mhm.
I think that the public discourse on disorders is so simplistic. It's such a complex problem. And I get that it's hard to understand. Sometimes I don't understand it. Like, the solution is right there. It seems so simple until you understand it's not about the food. So I just think it's important that people understand it's not sort of willful vanity. It's something much deeper than that.
And I think it's important that people hear you say that, Claire. You're speaking straight from experience. And so if this is something that someone is experiencing, know to seek out that help and to dig a little deeper and really find the root cause of what's happening, because for the next person it may not be depression as yours was. It could be their xyz factor.
Yeah.
And so really to hold that encouragement in that space to just step forward and move forward in your recovery. You talked about things are not practiced anymore the way that your treatment was. And I know in our pre call, you shared some of, if you do this, if you meet this weight, then you're rewarded here. Is that what you're referencing when you're saying some of those treatments were reinforced into validation for you?
Yes. I was made to feel like I was a naughty little girl who was just being defiant. Um, that's how you treat a child. And I wasn't a child. I was that in between stage between childhood and adulthood, which is very tricky. But at no point in my treatment was responsibility for my eating handed back to me. And that's why it was hard for me then to move out of that situation and just move on with my life. I was coming from a place of fear that I would lose weight because I hadn't been taught how to eat socially. Again, there's much more transition now, so that if people go to hospital, they are slowly exposed to those sort of things. But for me, when I left hospital, food was medicine, and I took it like pills. I had no enjoyment out of it. All I was doing was avoiding losing weight, and that's a pretty negative way to view something that's supposed to be one of life's pleasures.
Right. That's what so many of us gather around in celebration
Yeah,
is food. We
yeah.
connect with each other over food. What's
Which
your
is
favorite
why
restaurant? It's
which
yeah.
is why it was so hard for me to have a social life, because if you're avoiding social eating, you're avoiding everything.
And so you found this creative spark,
Yes.
this writer's ink in your blood. I love that analogy because I think many of us want to be writers and we're just like, I'm not. And you are fully owning that this is who I am. And you've built yourself around that and becoming a well versed, well known publisher. So, can you walk us through as we get ready to wrap up your story? Walk us through what you're doing today, Claire. And I know there's going to be some who see and hear you and want to connect with you. Please feel free to share how they may do so. And just know we'll put that in the show notes for you too.
Sure. As I said, I have a wonderful life now with a lot of freedom. So um, I write. I help other people write, especially memoirs, because I think everybody has a story to tell. Not everybody has all the skills to do that. So I take a lot of pleasure from helping other people write. I edit, and maybe I'm a better editor than writer, actually. And for the next little while, I really want to focus on getting my message out. As I said, it was quite hard for me to revisit this, but I feel that I want to encourage other people and give them hope. The easiest way to get me is through my website, which is clareloewenthal.com.au. It's a bit of a hard name, but I believe that you'll help people with that. So that's the easiest way for people to connect.
Wonderful. And your book just re-released. How can
Yes.
we purchase that or find that?
It's on Amazon, so it's called The Substance from the Shadow. And the easiest way is to go through Amazon, and you can buy a hard copy or an ebook.
Wonderful. Well, Claire, I want to thank you once more for being vulnerable, sharing your story with us, and allowing this platform to hold that space for you as you share it even more with the world.
My pleasure.
You just took another step towards owning your story and thriving against all odds. This is Affirm That Sh. Somehow I thrived. If you're ready to keep kicking ass, subscribe now and let's keep breaking barriers together. Remember, life's a battle, but somehow you'll thrive.